Good day, welcome to yet another edition of the COVID-19 podcast. I am Enoke Kaumba, and today we are going to be talking about the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic or the COVID-19 disease itself. As we move closer towards the end of of producing this podcast, we are taken back to where it all started, to the main story that resulted in the myth and the conspiracy theories coming in, and that is now the origin, or where this pandemic or this disease COVID-19 came from, and which is why we are here basically. And always to joining me in studio, or joining me via Zoom, that is a fact checker, editor of Namibia Fact Check, Mr. Frederico Links. Always a pleasure to have you, Mr. Frederico. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Enoke. Despite being under pressure at this point of the year, every year.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'm fine. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you about these important issues.
Maybe as we move a step, very step closer towards the end of this project, what are your overall views of this whole project?
I think it's worthwhile. I think it was very worthwhile. The feedback I've gotten from the community radio stations has been positive. Them saying that, some of them had said to me privately that they get feedback from their audiences that this has really helped them and been very informative for them. And it's helped them to also talk to other people about the facts of what's happening. So I'm glad to have played a role in this. And it's something I feel needs to continue. Perhaps we can look at going further with this in some form after the official this stage of this project comes to an end.
Okay, so COVID-19, or rather COVID origin lies, fuels distrust, and vaccines fears. What are we talking about in this article?
Well, there's been a lot of falsehoods spread about where the coronavirus comes from. Was the lab leak? Was it a bioweapon? And these have been these sorts of falsehoods have been going around, circulating for about since the beginning of the pandemic, since early in 2020. And you can find these fact checks, numerous fact checks actually, debunking some of these claims about the origins of the coronavirus. You can find them online to see how this progressed and how these sorts of lies have been adapted over time. This is an evolving thing, and it's still something that is circulating via social media. So it's something that we have to engage with, that we have to deal with, because people are still being confronted with these falsehoods.
Is it safe to say then that the origin of COVID-19 itself could be the main focal point of disinformation, conspiracy theories, like just the main? Is it safe to say that?
Well, yes. It's become sort of prominent again since the COVID-19 vaccines have been rolled out. That sort of had this resurgence now, and it's because of they're trying to depopulate the world. This is the conspiracy theory. They're trying to depopulate the world. They created a virus so they could inject us with a vaccine, and that's how they're going to engineer population control. So that's just one part of one conspiracy theory. But they have sort of been the origins conspiracy theories have accompanied various stages in this, and so yes, it is in there. It is always something. There's always one of those things in there, in all the disinformation, in all the anti-vaccine propaganda, in the conspiracy theories. It's always there somewhere. you'll find, that somebody will be saying that, yeah, it's because the virus is a bioweapon. It's because it's been engineered. It's because it leaked from a Chinese lab or so, so something like that. And even, the Chinese conspiracy theorists saying it is actually created by the Americans and they released it in China and so on. So it's always something that is in there amongst in all of the disinformation.
To date, what is research speaking towards the origin of this virus? Where did it originally start? You did speak something about researches that were conducted there, but I just want you to tell me up to date now. What do we have as a conclusive evidence as to what started this whole thing?
Well, I mean, there is no conclusive evidence about the origin of. I mean, the World Health Organization has sent a team of scientists to China at the beginning of this year to try and establish what happened and how it happened and so on. And the report from that from that mission, it's available online, by the way, on the World Health Organization website. And the report from that team, states clearly that. The lab leak theory is the least likely. The more likely is this direct, or is the scenario where the coronavirus was introduced into human populations via a host animal. Now, of course, the problem has been to find the host animal that carried the virus and that ultimately transmitted it to humans. That's why it's still not conclusive where and how the virus actually came to infect humans, how this actually happened. But it did seem to, the evidence points to these wet markets, or these animal markets in Wuhan and other parts of China that this could have happened. And since that report of that World Health Organization team came out in March this year, actually there have been other reports published since then that actually supports this theory of it having come, most probably via bats to an intermediate animal which still isn't identified, and then from that intermediate host to humans. But investigations are ongoing about this, and will probably ongoing for a while yet. And it has to be taken into account. Previous viral outbreaks, it took years and years for scientists to establish how it happened. So this is nothing new. That it's taking so long to figure this out is nothing new. But of course now scientists are under pressure to find out, because there's so much. Part of how to deal with this virus would be to establish where it came from and how it came about, and then that's how we can then sequence the original virus in the original host animal, and then try and figure out how to deal with it going forward. But some you never figure these things out. So this is nothing new that this hasn't been figured out yet. But investigations are ongoing. Of course, this thing has become politicized internationally. The former American administration was responsible for spreading the lab leak theory, and that was latched onto by conspiracy theorists and propagandists. And the U.S. government then investigated, and in August, yes. They the US intelligence sector came back and also gave a report to, I think it was early September, report to the US president that stated there is no conclusive evidence that the virus was engineered or that it came entered human populations because of a lab leak or so. So there's no evidence for that.
All right.
And since then, I mean, others have also published scientists have also published about this and stated, there's more evidence now sort of accumulating for this thing being natural, the coronavirus being natural with no human interference in its genome. And that it actually emerged naturally in that part of the world, that East Asia, it's just one of those things. But I mean, I think over time we'll have more evidence available publicly to know what's happened and how it happened and how this pandemic came about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frederico, for that very broad answer, and also giving us a little bit of research with the origin and just the evidence that's there that COVID-19 was not engineered or anything. Okay, I have about some few minutes left, very less. You are listening to the COVID-19 podcast. This podcast is proudly brought to you by the Namibia Media Trust, the Namibia newspaper, as well as the Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa. From what Mr. Frederico was saying, if you have a question, of course, you can tune into the radio stations that you are listening to this podcast from and ask your questions if you have further questions. I myself have one last question. Mr. Frederico Links, what do we say to the people that have distrust and vaccine fears because of the origin of COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to counter people's fears is to talk to them about what specifically is it about this that bothers you, and then to address point by point, if they're making these claims that they might have accounted on social media or in WhatsApp groups, you address them point by point and state, here is where you can get this information. This is what it's saying. This is go here. These are the credible sources that can help you understand what is happening, and they explain this. So I mean, if you have the time and the patience, and you're trying to get somebody, out of the mist of the fog of disinformation, take the time, walk them through the evidence, and explain to them, what the evidence says and so on. That would be my advice.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Frederico. Let's do this again next time.
Yes. Thank you very much, Enoke.
All right. And from all of us in studio, it's been a pleasure. Till the next time we have another COVID-19 podcast. For me, Enoke, it's bye-bye.